Totally, yes.
So we're having a bit of a celebration about the house we bought.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We thought it might be a good time to talk about what on earth we were doing and what was going through our head as we went into the project at Feline.
I think alcohol was going for our head.
I think that might account for a fair bit of it.
So I guess it all started
Don't blame me.
July last year.
Yes.
July last year, we were all in France together celebrating a very special occasion, party. And I know on our side we'd been watching lots of YouTube channels.
What was the special occasion?
My birthday.
Oh, how many years?
A significant milestone.
A milestone birthday. Cheers. And on our side, I know we'd been watching quite a few YouTube channels of various people that were doing up chateaus and major projects in France, and plus we've had the place here ourselves since 2020, and we just love the area. And so sort of we got thinking that we would be quite interested in buying something really super old with a lot of history and restoring it rather than letting it go to ruin. And so from your perspective, you like the idea of that.
Yeah, well, I did then.
Yeah.
It's bloody hard work.
I mean, you are getting the blame for this.
Yeah,
So roll with it. Yeah.
Got broad shoulders, I suppose.
But I'm not sure it was something we could have taken on our own. So that's where these guys come in.
I was thinking, lucky it's not a chateau, eh? Because that'd be a lot more hard.
I know.
Yeah, well, yeah. But we could have started with something smaller as well, just to...
We tried to. Remember that? We tried to. Remember that little place?
Yeah.
That was,
We could have just ripped out the
smaller
bathroom and
easier.
replaced the bathroom. And
We did look at a place in Authentique.
Yes.
the power was already there. It had
bit.
water and had everything, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except that sun trap on the roof. That wouldn't work. You know.
Anyway, it's what evolved.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, you were looking for a place that you'd be able to use in the future.
Yes.
Well, we've got this place here that we can use in the future.
Well, I think maybe Robert had a few beers and he got on board with Alan's enthusiasm and thought that he could contribute the hard work, practical side of things.
Yep. And
Yeah.
since then, I've learned a hell of a lot more around building in France.
And around what you can and can't do.
Like I can't order stuff
No, your
at a
capability.
shop. No, even just ordering supplies
Yeah,
is
true.
difficult. It's
true.
not as straightforward as one would think.
But you've had a lot more technical experience with things like this because you've done places in New Zealand.
Yeah, but that's wood. Wood is different to stone.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I've noticed that here that there's nothing straight, nothing's plumb, it's all how it is.
I think our contribution is that we're just up for anything. And we were like, sounds like a good idea.
Up to an adventure? Why not?
Don't think there was much more thought than that.
If we could think of any of the people we'd want to do it with, these guys were the ones we'd want to do it with. So,
I must have drunk a lot because I really don't remember the conversation.
yeah. So then,
We're
lo
going
and
to edit
behold,
that bit.
lo and behold, we're back here after the party, enjoying our time in our place here in France,
Yes.
and we start property hunting, which we always enjoy, no matter where in the world we are. And we saw a place down the road, which wasn't going to work because the Mairie didn't want it to be zoned
Amazing.
residential.
Probably that one.
Then we saw a place in Authentique, which we ended up deciding would be a much simpler project, but it was in a flood risk zone,
Yep.
and it would probably be much too small for what you were after, because the two of you are interested in something you can use where you want a garden and you want a
Yes.
pool and a
Yeah.
whole bunch of things that we wouldn't have got from that property. And how did you see Feline? It was you that stumbled across the property at Feline.
Yeah, the advertisement on Le Bon Coin, which is like Trade Me in New Zealand or like eBay somewhere else. It had all these pictures that were upside down, and I think therefore people hadn't actually looked at the ad.
Oh wow.
And so I thought, I'll just give them a call and I'll see what's going on with that. I think it was advertised at 40 something
We
thousand.
don't need to talk numbers.
Right. But yeah, I think the unprofessionalism of the advertisement had put a lot of people off, so they didn't.
Right, so
didn't go and
that's
check,
what drew you to the property.
Yeah,
Of
the
course.
unprofessionalism,
And the fact that it was
upside down
down.
photos.
Yeah, I figured,
Right.
So
I
you
figured that's a
biked
place for
past.
me. Yeah.
So you cycle past.
First time I rode past, yeah, I think I did. Yeah, because I geolocated it because there was just something on the advertisement which gave some clues as to where it was. So
Upside down.
yeah, rode past it and thought, yeah, it looks interesting. Nice big garden area.
So we made an appointment and went and had a look at it together and took loads of photos and videos, which we've subsequently been told by you guys were crap. But anyway, in order to show you, but we immediately saw potential.
Potential.
I think the building is
Yeah.
is maybe 2 or 3 buildings originally, and it's built on a historical Roman site, which
Yeah.
I think is kind of exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
we've found a few little treasures as we've gone, but I think we may find more
But we don't want to dig too deep.
when
Yeah.
we get stuck
Don't
into
wanna
the garden. But
hit the bodies.
While it would be wonderful to find some Roman stuff in there, that would be incredible. What a massive pain in the bum that would be. We don't want to dig deep and find a Roman mosaic under the house.
No.
So we think that we think, and this is the engineer we had to come and have a look at the house has kind of put some time frames on it as well for us. But we think that it could be up to 300 years old in some parts, and then sort of more like around about 120 years old in other parts.
Well, I think even older, because when I was looking up those flagstones and things,
Yeah.
they were done, I think, predominantly in the 1700s and stuff.
So we've got a house that's got flagstones on the ground floor. This is in one part of it.
Yeah.
Flagstones on the ground floor, very heavy, huge,
the
chunky
first
things,
floor.
and then
And-
flagstones on the second level.
Yeah.
Which people just don't do now. It would be wooden floors, so there's got to be some history in that. Anyway, so after loads and loads of photos and calls back and forward, we kind of decided that we would, as a team, take the plunge, and that this would
Yep.
be a home that you guys could use
Yep.
in the future, and we would get the benefit of being able to chip in and kind of flex the technical muscle we don't have, but we're hoping to develop,
Yeah.
and do it as a
project to get your teeth into.
do it as a team.
Yeah.
And that would have been a very difficult thing to do from New Zealand if you, without the experience of buying a house here. So one thing that I can say, because we have bought houses in other parts of the world as well, is that the property purchasing process in France is actually relatively straightforward compared to other parts of the world.
But it's different though. Eh?
It's very different.
It's not what you'd expect. In New Zealand, the way forward in buying a house is known to most people buying a house, but it feels like it's kind of reversed here in France.
Well, in New Zealand, you put in the offer, it's accepted, and then you make your plans from there. Whereas here, it felt like we had to do all the plans first with the engineer and the architect, and get it signed off by the Mary, and before we even got to an agreed offer stage. So it's like the flip of it.
Yeah, it's like reversed.
You don't put the offers in writing here.
Yeah, and all of
So-
that.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's like a
So-
conditional offer, isn't it?
But you've got to figure out
But
that
the
you can meet
conditions
all
are
your
kind of
conditions
with the Mary.
first
Correct.
before you
Yeah.
even. Yeah.
So I had the dialogue before we even went ahead and got the permit for all the work we want to do. I had the dialogue directly, in this case directly with the vendor, because he was selling privately, and we went back and forth and agreed a price just verbally on
Yeah.
WhatsApp and over phones, and met him a couple of times, and only once the price was agreed did we need a contract. So I don't know what happens at that point if someone else, I guess if someone else swoops in with a higher price, you lose it. So at that point we contacted a notaire here. People don't use lawyers here for this property stuff. They use a notaire. So we contacted the notaire,
So what's a notaire again?
like a notary public.
So what
So
does that mean?
they're
What would the equivalent
What-
in New Zealand be?
well, you have notary
Property
publics. in New Zealand.
registrar or something.
Justice
Oh,
of the,
registrar.
Justice
Okay.
of the peace, or
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff.
so
Ah,
they're
it's a
not
JP.
fully. I don't think they're
So
fully
they're not
legally
lawyers.
qualified, but
Ah.
they have the qualifications needed to do wills, marital contracts, prenuptial agreements, properties.
So like a registrar.
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Jay, I've learned something new today.
So we reached out to the notaire that we'd been dealing with, which coincidentally was the same notaire that the vendor was used to using. And the great thing is that she speaks English, and said, we've reached a deal on this property,
Yeah.
and can you draw up the papers? So then the next step is you get a Comprimis document, which, if you recall, was about 30 pages of French. that we
In French.
translated and read
Yeah.
that told us all about the property. And we also got a diagnostic report, which you don't always get in New Zealand. If you get it in New Zealand, as the buyer, you have to pay for it. But in France, the seller must get, by law, a diagnostic report, which was able to tell us whether the property had termites, whether it
Yes.
had lead,
Yes.
whether it had asbestos. So there were a whole number of things that it goes through that give you more technical information about the property.
In New Zealand, all you have to do is get a meth check on your house. So, the rest of it's fine. Sorry.
But the buyer-
and hopefully there's meth in your house.
But the buyers do that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
So we
Exactly,
got a
yeah.
diagnostic
That's on
report that the
all on the
vendor
buyer.
had paid for, and then we got presented with this Comprimis, which we read through in detail with a translated version of, and we put conditions in, only one condition in, actually, a condition in that we needed to get a permit because the property would only work for you guys if it would have
If
a
we
pool,
could, yeah.
and if you could put more windows in, because
Yeah.
obviously being a really
Garden.
old property, there wasn't
Yeah.
enough
Doors.
light.
And have the French doors
No,
from
no.
the garden into the house.
We're in France because they're just
Oh,
called
they're
doors.
just doors.
Because
To have the doors, in
doors
from the garden
installed,
to the
yeah.
house. Of French design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And air conditioning was a
Les
must
portes
for you.
anglaises,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets bloody hot here. Yeah.
So we also had we had the big crack up the front of the facade, which we got an engineer to come and take
Yeah.
a look at,
Yeah.
and then the architect was the one that got the drawings together for the exterior of the property that went into the mayor's office in
Yes.
Feline, and it's the mayor who signs off on the permits. In our case, it
Yeah.
was I think it might have even only been a declaration préalable because we weren't doing major works.
Yeah.
So it was a fairly simple process to get the approvals, but it did take from August to
Months.
November,
Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks.
But then so weird that you have to do all of that before you even reach a kind of contractual agreement.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we
with-
signed the compromise with that in it as a condition.
Yeah. But it easily could have been, the mayor could have said no.
And,
Would've been it.
for us, the Māori is kind of like the council. So it's like putting, council consents and stuff.
Before you've even...
Before
yeah.
you've even bought the property,
Yeah.
which is kind of weird.
Well, we needed to, in our case, to be fair, we needed to know those things were possible because we wouldn't have been interested in the
It
property had
makes
they not
sense.
been.
Absolutely.
It makes
Yeah.
sense that you do it that way. That
Yeah.
you know that the property will be fit for the purpose that you want it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be before you even take it on.
And the Mary was fairly easy to deal with. We did need the architect to do the drawings, but all of that was relatively smooth. And then once that came through in about November, it was only, we then have to advertise that. So the way it works in France, you get your approved permit, and then you have to put a board up,
Yeah.
For 3 months.
Like a physical...
which we actually have, and we have a
board.
picture of, so I'm
do.
sure
3 months.
we will be able to show it. But
Yeah.
it has to go up for 3 months for the neighbours to complain. Now, in our case,
Yeah.
there's absolutely no
For
complaints.
the neighbours to complain.
Yeah.
The neighbours.
To give
Or
them...
not, or
yeah,
not,
or
yeah.
not.
Oh,
In our
yeah.
case, the neighbours, I think, are probably delighted that we're doing
Yeah.
something with this house because
But
it hadn't
to give
been
them
lifted.
an
Well, they keep on
opportunity
popping in,
to-
don't they? And
Yeah.
talking to us.
They love us.
En français,
They love
bien
us.
sûr.
Yeah.
They love us.
Yeah.
So we had to leave that up to make sure we weren't going to get any objections. And only at that point did we reach out again to the notaire to say we're ready to close.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
so only after all that negotiation,
So was
and then
that February?
3 months from the... So I think the sign went up in November.
December,
and
January,
yeah.
February.
late
Yeah.
February.
So it was late February.
Yeah.
So 3 months there, and so it's 5 months in total to buy this property.
It's a long
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Well, and then we didn't actually close until March.
True.
Yeah.
So then the contract gets drawn up, the Acte, Vente, I think it's called. I don't know how the French pronounce it.
Vente.
Which is your final sales document. And it, to be fair, it was a long document, but it had a lot of repetition from
Yeah.
the compromis that we'd already signed.
Yeah.
Right back when we signed the compromis, we had this 10-day cooling off period as well,
Oh, yeah.
which we don't have in New Zealand. So you sign it, and you have 10 days before you have
change
to
your
pay the
mind.
deposit, where you can change the mind as a
Yeah.
buyer.
Do you not have that in New Zealand?
No.
No.
No,
I
once
thought you
you've
did.
signed...
Once you sign it, you're
well,
done.
you might have like diligence from your lawyer,
Oh,
but
okay,
pretty
right.
much once you've signed and got unconditional...
No, they must have been
notice.
talking about that in law school or something once upon a time because, when you buy an apartment in Auckland, often from a new development, there's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on purchases and that sort of thing. So I thought they had a cooling off period for that. Obviously not. Okay.
Do you know the
You
other
can take
thing?
that
Do you
bit.
remember the other thing that was interesting? Is that when we were first doing the compromis, we had to send all our paperwork, ID documents for KYC, and they put the property in yours and my maiden names,
I know.
which in my case I haven't used for decades,
No,
and in your case you
no.
haven't used for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's the way things are done in France.
Yes.
And I remember
Yes.
when we bought the property here, and they wanted me to show ID in
Of
my
your maiden
maiden
name,
name,
yeah.
and I'm like, well, I haven't had my maiden name for
No. So the
The
property.
couple of decades.
French obviously don't trust marriages in France.
So the property has now been registered.
And
we've got our maiden
4
names.
Maiden names, yeah. Yeah.
Very strange.
I know. I did
And
it
then-
for my birth certificate. I haven't seen that for years.
Yeah. Very odd. And so then in this process, remember, there were 2 meetings with the notaire, which fortunately we were able to conduct on Zoom calls.
Yes.
Where she talks us through, and she acts for the buyer and the seller, which is interesting, because in New Zealand you would have a lawyer for the
Your own
buyer
lawyer.
and a
Yes.
lawyer for the seller.
But even just being in a meeting with the seller was
at the
so
same
weird,
time.
you know, that we were conversing with and ironing out the real nutty points, and we were all on the conversation together.
Yeah. And you ask questions,
yeah.
and she was able to respond, and she basically talks you through the document before you sign. And then the Acte Vente got signed, and money changes hands, and we had to get insurance.
Yeah.
So the one thing I will say is that as foreigners buying in France, it really is pretty straightforward.
Mm.
When it comes to getting insurance and stuff, that's possibly slightly trickier. We just went with the company. We for the
Yeah,
Feline
and we
house.
didn't need a mortgage as well. If we needed a mortgage, then
Yeah.
it gets complicated.
Well, I
doesn't it?
think it's going to end up being harder for us to get a bank account here than it would have been to buy a property.
Yeah.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, which is
The banking
Crazy.
process here is long-winded
yeah.
and problematic. And so, in our case, for Feline, we went ahead and got insurance with the same insurance company we already had a relationship with for our house and
Yeah.
stuff here.
When you say a relationship with, what does that mean?
Previous business.
We already have policies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that made it relatively easy. But what I would say to the general public is that anyone looking to buy here, it's a long process. But there was never a question of a foreigner being able to buy,
No,
or
no.
Why are you buying this property? You're not from France, or anything like that.
Never
Nothing
had to
like
provide
that comes up.
proof of your intentions in terms
Well, I
of
think in
living
this
here.
part of the world, they actually encourage it because the villages don't have a lot to offer for young people. So the young people are all moving off.
Yeah.
The villages have quite a few empty buildings,
Yeah.
and they just want the population to at least remain stable.
Yeah.
So it's no problem for them to have foreigners here.
Yeah.
And they were probably delighted we were going to spend money on the place, which has a lot of history.
And to be fair, there's quite a few foreigners who actually live in smaller villages, from America, from
totally.
UK,
Australia.
and a
You've
variety
met
of different
some.
New
places.
Zealand.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even New Zealanders.
And we find the French are actually very welcoming.
yeah,
Very-
more so to
Yeah,
New
it's
Zealanders.
Oh yeah, of course we always make sure that we
they
tell them
know.
that
Yeah.
we're not actually English.
Yeah.
Because they hear us speaking French badly and assume we're English all the time.
Unless
So we have to.
probably the weekend that we're playing rugby against them, and then
Oh.
we won't say.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the association for the French in New Zealand is always about the All Blacks, so that does come up quite often.
Yeah.
Especially in the south of France.
Do you know the other thing that's interesting is when you buy a house in New Zealand and you sign the contract, it will have an exact date when you're closing on the house in the contract.
Settlement date. Yep.
And you have to close on that date, or you're up for penalties, or you might lose your deposit, and the whole deal might fall through. Well, in France, it was basically how long is a piece of string? You've got to get your permit, and then after that, you've got to get your insurance. And so,
Yeah.
even once I'd got the building permit and I reached out to the notaire to say, right, we're ready to close, and she was like, right, well, you need to show me that you've got insurance, and da-da-da-da-da, and like there was a list of 2 or 3 things that we had to show her we had, and she wasn't saying that all needs to happen by next Friday because we've got a date in the contract.
Yeah.
It was very much, just let me know when you've got those things, and then I'll set a closing date. And then on the closing date, the seller went round to the notaire's office, which I think if we'd been here, we would have been expected to too. But
Yeah.
instead, we jumped on the Zoom call,
Yeah.
and the notaire basically took the keys after we'd talked through a few things from the seller and said, I'm holding them here, let me know what to do with them.
What keys?
And everything closed.
Yeah, what
What
keys?
keys?
There's
What
actually
keys?
no
Well,
keys.
We didn't
Yeah.
have keys for Evelyn, but the
The intellectual
They would-
property of the
Yes.
lock number.
suddenly changed. Everything suddenly changed, and I'd had to wire the money to her account a day or two, a couple of days before we even had that meeting.
Wow. Wow.
So the closing date was just slightly arbitrary. It's just when everyone's ready.
And then it happened to close on our daughter's birthday.
So that's great. You'll never forget.
Yeah, I know. You remember that.
But what's your perspective? Because I know you guys have been thinking that you wanted. This is a holiday home for you.
Yes.
And you'd been looking at holiday homes.
Yeah.
Probably more the beach style than the vineyard and country style.
Yeah.
In New Zealand. So what was the rationale? You'd been up to France, stayed with us a couple of times. What was the rationale? How does this work? Why did this work for you?
Well, we had a holiday home before in New Zealand, and we had that for a couple of years, and then we sold, and we've since moved.
We fully
cities.
renovated it, and
We renovated that. It's a good experience.
Hence technical experience that we don't have.
Yeah.
we renovated it for years and years and years, and,
And then we
once
had-
we finally finished it, my wife sold it.
Yeah, I know. We were ready. We'd moved, and we were ready to look for another holiday home, and we'd kind of gone from our house. Knew that we wanted to be coastal in New Zealand, and looked kind of 2 hours north, 2 hours south, and just the cost of property in New Zealand was,
Beachfront.
and for what we would need to spend in terms of what we would end up getting, it just didn't marry up. And then this opportunity happened, and we worked out the costs, and we looked at what the commitments would be in terms of airfares every year, and time off work and annual leave, and how we would juggle that, and it just made more sense. And we
More dollars actually.
more dollars.
It makes
We're-
financial sense.
We're not a stranger to crazy processes like this. We sat at our friend's house before we bought our lake house in New Zealand. We sat at our friend's house, and the house the house next door was on the market, and we were like,
After
Hold-
a few wines.
after a few wines, hold my wine, and so we bought that house, and so we have done that before. We've bought, actually, when we were in France
The last
2 years ago,
yeah.
when we were here, we saw the house back in New Zealand that we
Bought online.
subsequently bought.
You
and
bought
that
a
you
lot
now
of
live in.
things
That we
sight
now lived in.
unseen.
So we bought
Yeah.
that sight unseen, so
Yeah.
we're not.
And funny enough, I
know.
think we just did this one sight
Yeah.
unseen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
also
we-
the car.
You trusted
And
us.
I actually,
We trusted you too.
Yeah.
with the car, because we'd bought a what was it, back in March, we bought a car for these guys on their behalf,
Yeah.
which is a VW diesel station wagon.
Passat. Yep.
Yeah.
Because we
And
need
it's a
something to
brilliant
work
car,
because our car's
absolutely
too
brilliant
small.
car for the job. But I was a bit apprehensive of buying it, and I sent a message to Rob saying, you wouldn't buy a car sight unseen, would you, in New Zealand? And he goes, well, actually, no, I have. Several times, and a motorbike, and an RV, and
And a house.
and a house. Yeah. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we knew with the car that we needed to hit the ground running. We didn't
Yeah.
want a week or 2 weeks of
Looking
trying to
for a
find a
car.
car. We needed a car.
Yeah.
So
that
we
was
just bought a
convenient.
house.
And the car's
unseen,
worked out
so
brilliantly.
The
Oh,
car,
actually, it's amazing.
the car's
It's good.
been, yeah.
It's only done 370,000 k's, which is a doddle.
Yeah.
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 That's fine.
Aircon works. She goes and goes and goes. That was a good little find actually, and good little buy.
Yeah.
Comes down to trust a lot though, because we went into this project, we absolutely trust you guys,
Yeah.
and I don't think you could go into a project like this as friends if you didn't have each other's back, and
Yeah.
it can't be all that bad.
Yeah.
If these guys are in, can't be
And
the end of the world.
Just like your attitude to life, like when we came here and we spent 3 months in Europe 2 years ago, it would have been so easy to say, no, we can't because we've got a 2-year-old, or no, we can't because we've got lives, or no, we can't. And we were like, nah, like, just do it. And then same with this, we could have said, no, we can't because, how are we going to get there every year? And no, we can't because of the financial contribution or anything like that. But why not? Why not just do it?
Why
And
not?
Yeah,
why,
absolutely.
Why not? But I think it's easy to shy away from things and say, no, that's outside of the realm of what we could do, but actually do it.
Well,
See what happens.
and in terms of real estate, we've always been the same.
Yeah.
We've bought places,
Take a
bought in
risk.
places that we didn't know a huge amount about. Like when we bought here, we didn't know a huge amount about. You just go with it.
Yeah.
And it's always worked out with real estate. For me,
Yeah.
I feel it always works out because
Yeah.
That just
Hard to
reminds
go
me
wrong.
actually, I put the roof on Coronation Road on that garage lean-to thing that was at the front there.
we still own Coronation.
Yeah, but I replaced the roof because it was leaking at the back, and I remember getting all the corrugated iron and stuff, and Dad gave me a hand to smack it all together. So, that roof was much easier than the roof we're doing now.
Oh yeah, well, tiles. You've not worked with tiles before, and
No.
you've not worked with stone before because in New Zealand everything's wood.
Yes.
What have you found about the building material prices and things when we go to the Brico?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell because New Zealand dollar compared to the euro is $50 New Zealand is 25 euros. So
About half.
it's about half. And when I go and think about the prices, so a bag of that premix cement would cost me in New Zealand $20. And here I find it's a little bit more expensive actually.
Probably, yeah, marginally, isn't it?
But
I bought the other day were 12 or 13.
we
euros.
find on some of the
Yes, see?
we find on some of the bigger things it's significantly cheaper. So I think in New Zealand when we buy a hot water cylinder, we pay like $1,500 or something for a hot
And
water
those
cylinder in New Zealand.
doors, those like massive French doors, which were €600, and I've got nothing to compare it to, but it felt
Oh,
like
much
it was
more
well
expensive.
priced.
Yeah.
Were they 600? I thought they were only 400.
Euro.
Yeah.
I think the big French door was 629 or something like that.
But the hot water cylinder here, the
Seemed
water
reasonable.
heater,
Yeah.
for a big one is like €250.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
some
think we
things.
pay about $1,500
You pay a lot more
in New Zealand for a hot
Well, they ship
water
all the way
heater.
down. And
Yeah.
to be fair, we got a second-hand one, so we got it for a steal, I think.
Oh, you didn't even pay $250 anywhere near $250 for your second hand one. But if you were buying if you buy a brand new one, when you buy a brand new one, because
Yes.
you'll need more than one in a house of your size.
Yeah.
You're looking at what €250, I think, for a new
Yeah.
water heater, a larger one, and they're significantly more than that in New Zealand.
So mixed. Some more expensive, some cheaper. You spend euro like Monopoly money anyway. You're like, oh, it's only 12 euro.
Doesn't mean anything to me.
It's cheaper.
Yeah.
So I think overall it's going to be good. It's going to be amazing for you guys as a home when it's done, holiday home when it's done, and I think we're going to end up finding that it's definitely significantly cheaper than anything you could have done in New Zealand
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
on the holiday
Yeah.
home front by a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. I mean, for us, less accessible. We'll only get here once a year, but hopefully for a longer time than we would, with a place in New Zealand. But I guess for us, the travel aspect, that this will be just kind of like the gateway to be able to go anywhere.
Everywhere.
Europe's a
everywhere.
long way from New Zealand, but once you're
Absolutely.
here,
Once you're here and you've got a little, place to call home, and it's just so much more accessible.
I think the thing that sold me was Alan said to me that you'll have a bolt hole in France so you can travel everywhere. And we love travelling. We love exploring new countries and
That
stuff.
was quite an intelligent thing for me to say.
You know.
It was,
can't have been too many wines before
are
that.
you sure it was me?
Yeah.
Good.
Happy?
All right.
Should be enough.
We
there
should do
to
more.
Cobble together.
Probably is.
Oh, God.
Let's finish one first.
Oh, yeah.
Let's finish one
A few years of work ahead of us.
Cheers. Like and subscribe.
Yes.
Ring that bell.
Cheers.
Oh, oh, oh.